In the weeks since the Parkland school shooting, there has been a vast hue and cry from the left, clamoring for gun control and against gun rights, you know, demonizing and vilifying the NRA, which is one of America's most popular lobby groups. And, you know, jumping right on board with this has been corporate America. A lot of corporations have severed ties with the NRA, who formerly, you know, offered discounts to members. Most of the rental car companies, Hertz, Avis, Enterprise, some hotels, Wyndham and Best Western, and even some airlines, you know, Delta Airlines, United Airlines. And this last bit is especially funny because, you know, there's been this expression, flyover country, for a while, which denotes, you know, like red state America, the 2,800 counties or something that lean red, you know, not the blue urban liberal centers, mostly on the coasts, but the red heartland of America has been traditionally known as flyover countries. And to Delta and United Airlines, if you want to make this a reality and not just an expression, you know, go right ahead, because we're not getting on your planes and we don't want the liberal filth you're bringing, you know, so don't land. You know, you can fly back and forth all you want from New York to Los Angeles, but don't try to fucking land in flyover country, because we don't want the vile corruption, the filth, the diseased, putrid rot that you're bringing. And these are, you know, these are terms that invoke a disgust response. And the disgust response is an evolutionary response. It's an immune reaction, basically. It's to avoid, you know, disease and scat. And, you know, vectors for disease. And that's what these people are. You know, leftists love scat. They love shit. They love feces. They love, you know, effluent. And they love disease. And they are diseased ideologically and mentally. And so this immune reaction, this disgust reaction, can have a valid, you know, moral and social component to it as well. Because these people are morally and socially and ideologically diseased. They're mentally diseased. And so, you know, this disgust reaction is a perfectly apt moral immune system response to this kind of filth and corruption. And now Google has jumped in as well. You know, they were censoring Google shopping search results for anything having to do with guns, or even just containing the character string GUN, Gundam, Guns N' Roses, Gunner Optics, you know, anything with gun in it, whether it had to do with guns or not. You know, just a really ham-handed censorship attempt for Google, which is really concerning because Google's kind of like a gatekeeper to information, and they control the flow of information. And if they're using their power to do that in a very clumsy and ham-handed way to censor search results, you know, that's something that's tremendously concerning and ought to, you know, worry people who use their platform and maybe convince them not to use their platform. Now, this is a Google platform right here. And we've seen an increase in censorship and crackdown on right-wing expression on this platform and other social media, which, again, these are leftist institutions. Now, all of these companies that have jumped into this fray have taken huge beatings in public approval. You know, they've gained public approval among Democrats and liberals, leftists, and they've lost public approval among conservatives and Republicans and right-wingers. But on net, they've lost. And this is not surprising. You know, if you want to have the largest market share possible, and if you want to address the largest market possible, you can't jump into these kind of controversial issues and take a side, because you're automatically going to alienate half the population. Now, part of why they do this is because the left side, the liberals, the social justice warriors, will punish you as a company for not jumping in on their side. Not jumping in on their side is tantamount to taking the other side for them. And conservatives don't seem to have this hang-up necessarily. So, not taking a side to leftists kind of is taking a side and alienates them a little bit. But, definitely taking a side against conservatives alienates conservatives. And so if you're trying to maintain a market dominant position, you are better off just not taking a side. But I'm happy that these companies are taking a side. I'm happy that they're jumping in, because now they can take a beating in the marketplace. And this can open up new niches for companies that serve our interests and serve our demographics explicitly. And Conquest's second law states that any organization which is not explicitly right-wing will sooner or later become explicitly left-wing. And part of that is this dynamic I mentioned, where leftists will punish you for not taking their side. And part of it is the ease with which they can infiltrate and influence and bully and intimidate organizations. Just because somebody can do the job that you're posting doesn't mean they're not an activist, and they're not going to try to influence your organization and hold you hostage and make demands and cause trouble. And they can cause a tremendous amount of trouble and tremendous amount of expense. And so, it often seems like, especially to managers who are not owners, that the easiest thing to do is to try and appease these people and to try to accommodate these people rather than fighting them and resisting them. Certainly it's easiest in the short term, even if it negatively impacts the profit of the company or the competitiveness of the company. But again, if these managers are not shareholders, you have a principal agent problem, and so the easiest path for them is not necessarily the best path for the company or the organization. And so, I'm hopeful that the agitation of these left-wing lunatics, these parasitic, malicious, lying left-wing lunatics that are able to infiltrate and influence these companies, will ultimately cause them to squander market share. And we see this happening all over. We see the Oscars getting low ratings. We see films getting low box offices. We see the NFL crashing and burning, the fake news media, going down in the ratings. It's all great. I love it. I want to see more of it. And I want to see alternatives that address our demands as consumers. And it's really, really pretty freaking amazing and hilarious that the left has now made common cause with corporate America to wage culture war. So hilarious. It's not a turn of events that you would have expected a decade ago, but it's pretty explicable and pretty foreseeable in terms of institutional incentives. So I hope it continues. I hope they crash and burn. I hope there are alternatives on the rise that address our segment of the market. And I just want to see this polarization and this self-segregation continue. And so that we can have economic secession and economic independence, and hopefully ultimately political secession and political independence, because that's the only way to avoid a deepening and intensifying conflict that spirals out of control. Not that that would necessarily be a bad thing either, because that's something we can win. That's something that can, and we can take it all. We don't just have to settle for our areas of the country, as overwhelmingly large as they are compared to the blue areas. We can take it all. So, no matter how it goes, I think it's going to be helpful and good for us, and not for them. Not for these foul, putrid, corrupt, ignorant, totalitarian, meddlesome, mentally ill, morally defective, deranged individuals, these leftist individuals, this spreading leftist cancer, this moral and ideological contagion, this diseased, malformed worldview, this disgusting, putrid, corrupt, diseased, malformed worldview that's based on parasitism and lies and malice. I'd like to see this stuff crash and burn.